Okay, so we left off last class with, I think, we had finished this first problem, the 12x squared plus 5x minus 2. Okay. Okay. So, and this one, what's different about this trinomial, this quadratic trinomial, than the ones we solved before? Okay. So a does not equal 1. It's where it has a number before the x. So we've got a 7 here. Okay, good. So what do we do there? What do we do now in that case? Okay, so what numbers do we multiply together? Okay, so really just the constants. So 7 and negative 6. Okay, so we do 7 times negative 6 because it's just the formula of how we do it, because we're going to split it in the middle. There's Right, we're going to use those to split the middle. Because remember before, like here, it says rewrite the middle term. We're going to rewrite the middle term as a sum of the factors. So we have plus something and plus something else. We're going to split this once we know the factors. If you remember from last class. Yeah, okay. Okay, so well, let's pick up here then. What is, well, and we'll walk through it even if you don't remember. So what's 7 times negative 6? Okay, negative 42. So now we need to find the factors of, so this is the factors of 82. So what are the factors of negative 42, or AC, sorry. So these are negative 42, whose sum is B. Okay, so B is here. Okay, so we're trying to get this positive 11. So 14 times negative 3 equals negative 42, but 14 plus negative 3 equals a positive 11. We good so far? Yep. So we just took this 11x, right? What was 11x? We split into a 14x minus 3x because it still equals 11. 14 minus 3 is still 11. It came from here. It was 14 and negative 3. Those were our factors. Because in order to get a negative 42, we have, what are the factors of 42? So we have we have to have a positive and a negative to get a negative 42. It's just factoring. You got it. But then we replace that 11x with the two new factors.
So if none of the factors add up to what B is supposed to be, is it no solution?
It would be, but I'm not going to give you any of those at this point. Like, because we're just starting out, I want you to be like, okay, there's going to have to be a solution. What is it going to be? Okay. All right. So then next, we group these. Okay, so it says group the first two terms. So 7x squared and 14x we put in a group. And then we're going to group the last two terms. So negative 3x and negative 6. We've grouped those. Now we need to factor the GCF from each group. So what do 7x squared and plus 14x, what are the factors they have in common? So what's the number? 7. And they both have an x. Okay. So Brandon, 7x squared divided by 7x gives me what? 7 divided by 7 wouldn't give me 2, just x. Okay, good. How about 14x divided by 7x? It would give me 2, so this would be x plus 2. Awesome. All right, let's look at negative 3x and negative 6. What factor do they have in common? A negative 3. So I'm taking that out. Negative 3x divided by negative 3 is x. Good. Negative 6 divided by negative 3 is a positive 2. So I'm going to have plus 2.
And then since it's the same thing, what you do is, what is it, x plus 2 and then 7x minus 3?
Yep, because remember, these are those common binomials. That's a common binomial. We factored that out the other day. So then we're going to have, so we can have x plus 2. We'll factor that out, and we're left with 7x minus 3. And then we're done.
What about the other numbers?
What other numbers?
Where's the 7x?
They came from here. What was left behind? There was a 7x here and a minus 3 here.
Oh, because those other two are the same, so
Mm-hmm.
you don't combine them?
Well, so again, because these are the same, we factored, but then we're like, hey, these are the same. We can factor that out. And then we say, oh, well then, because 7x is being multiplied by x plus 2. And negative 3 is multiplied by x plus 2. So we factor that out and say, well, that's being factored by both of those. So when we would turn around and FOIL later to check, we're going to get back up to the same thing we started with, the 7x squared plus 11x minus 6. So you want to see it FOILed so you can... Sure. Okay. All right, so how do we feel about that?
Good in the moment.
Good in the moment? Okay. Well, there are several steps. So I get that. All right, let's try the next one. So the note here says always try to factor the GCF first. Okay, so always try to factor the GCF first. So if we look at this one, that negative 3x squared plus 15x, or sorry, x cubed plus 15x squared minus 36x. Is there a GCF? Yeah. 3x. Okay, so let's factor out a 3x. So that's going to leave negative 3x cubed divided by 3x is going to be...
Negative x.
Okay, so here's another question. This one's not negative. We could also factor out the negative and make this one a minus and everything else positive. Does not matter really in the least. It's just preference. So, but we'll just take the 3x for now. So it's going to leave us with negative x squared plus x minus 12. Okay. The reason I say it's preference, if we leave the negative, is this, which form do we have to use since that's a negative?
Oh,
Like,
so a doesn't equal 1 since the negative is there.
a doesn't equal 1 since the negative's there, so you'd have to do the other method. You'd have to take a negative times a negative 12. If we factor it out, right, the negative 3x, that would simply change this to a positive, this to a negative, and that to a positive.
Let's do that.
Okay. I was like, ultimately, it's a little bit easier to make this a positive. So this negative 3x cubed divided by negative 3x is just going to give us x squared. Then we get a negative 5x plus a 12x. Okay. So yeah, that gives us that x is equal to, or a is equal to 1 value. Perfect. Okay, so when we have an a that's equal to 1, right? So there's no number, there's nothing in front of the x squared. All we have to worry about are the factors of this number. And I should have put the plus in there, of the positive 12. So what are the factors of positive 12 that get me negative 5? So again, if we're thinking there's 1 and 12, there's 2 and 6, there's 3 and 4.
None of those work.
None of those work. Okay, so then this is it. Negative 3x times x squared minus 5x plus 12
Answer.
is the answer.
Would we have gotten the same thing if
We had taken out 3x instead of -3x.
Either way, you would have gotten the same thing.
would we have gotten the same thing if we didn't factor out first and we just went off the -3x cubed,
Okay.
15x squared?
So if we had done -3 times -36, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So that would give us a positive what? 3 times 30 is 90. 3 times 6 18. 108. Okay. And then so what factors of 108 would give us 15?
Yeah, let's get this.
So 3 and 36 is 1. So let's see. 1 and 108. 2, 54. 3 and 36. 4. So it doesn't. I had my calculator out. So if we take 108 divided by 4, which I don't believe works. Well,
4 and 27.
yep, 4 and 27. There we go. That still wouldn't get us 15. We can't do 5. 108 divided by 6 is 18. 6 and 18 could get me 12, right? Or a larger number. 108 divided by 7. No, it would be 15. 108 divided by 8. I don't think any of the others work. Oh, that's a times. Sorry. 108 divided by 8. 13.5. 108 divided by 9 should get me something. So we have 9 and 12. 10 won't work. 108 divided by 11 is not going to give me anything. And then we're back at 12. So we've checked all of them. None of these work. So at that point, you would say, oh, I can't do anything, which would not be true. Okay. If you were asked to factor it, leaving it in this form is not factored. Okay. You would have to take it and factor something out. Does that make sense? We just can't factor the trinomial piece, like we can't factor it down to 2 binomials sometimes. Okay. All right. Then let's look at the pattern stuff. Practice with those patterns a little bit more. Yes. All right, so recognizing patterns will make you quicker. So let's look at this note here. So first it says, look for perfect square numbers. And I listed them out, several of them out here for you. Okay, so 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, 100, 121, 100, 44. I was like, I lost my train of thought there. Okay, so looking for those perfect squares is going to be helpful. Number times itself. So 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 3 is 9. 4 times 4 is 16. 5 times 5 is 25. Okay, so you're looking for those perfect square numbers. So like if I looked at A where it says Factory's trinomial, this is a perfect square. If you see a perfect square, you should, like, I don't know, flares should go shooting off from your brain. Be like, hey, I might have a shortcut here. Okay, because we have these patterns that if we have a perfect square in here, okay, we see these perfect squares, especially if we see them at the end, we should look, that's where they're the most, I shouldn't say the most common, but when we're most likely to see them, I feel like, is when we see them at the end. But if we see a perfect square in a problem, our mind should kind of go to this shortcut option. Okay. All right. So in this first one, or if we look back at these, we talked about these conjugates. So if we have the quantity a plus b times a minus b, it gives us this binomial, a squared minus b squared, that has that perfect square in it. So if we look at example 5, it says factor each trinomial. Okay, so x squared plus 10x plus 25. So the perfect square is 25. Okay, that's a clue. So then it's like, hey, let's look at the front. Is x squared a perfect square? Yeah. Okay, what I mean by a perfect square is can you take the square root of it? Square root of x squared is x. Okay, so if we think about that for a second, the square root of x squared is x. The square root of 25 is 5.
So can we skip the whole process and just write the answers x plus 5 in parentheses and then the next parentheses x minus 5?
Well,
Or
if
would it be 2x plus 5?
okay, so that's a good question. Okay, so we have x squared. So we see this is a squared and this is b squared. So then this is a positive, right? 2 times ab. So 2 times ab. So 2 times 5x is going to be 10x, but it's a positive 10x. So we need to backtrack it, and it's this one. So it's going to be x plus 5 squared.
So do you ever really have to worry about what's in the middle, or will it just automatically happen by finding the front one and the last one?
The only part you have to worry about in the middle is if it is a positive or a negative.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Makes it easier.
Yeah. Okay, so let's look at the next one. So here we have a square. 49 is a perfect square. What's the square root of 49? 7. Okay, I'm going to write this up here. So how about this one? Is there a square root?
Yes.
Is that a perfect square?
Yes.
What's the square root of 4?
2.
2. What's the square root of y squared? Okay, so this is 2y. And then what's in the middle? A negative. So it's like this one. So this would be,
Or no, I'm sorry, AY.
no, sorry, that's a 2.
Yeah, sorry. 2y minus 7 squared.
2y. Oh, I don't know what I was doing there.
Minus 7
All right, 2y minus 7 squared. You got it. That's the shortcut. Ooh, C looks tricky, huh? But it only has 2 terms.
So could you not just find the... No, but it doesn't have a perfect square. The right side, the left side does, but the right side doesn't.
32 is not a perfect square either. 36 is, but 32 is not.
Yeah, that's what I said. The 32 wasn't, but the 8 is.
The 8 is not. It's a cube. It's a perfect cube, but not a square.
So
So remember the rule that I said earlier. Always try to factor out a GCF first.
okay, so 8 goes into no. Will it go into? Yeah, it's 4. Okay, so 8 in the both, so it becomes a squared minus 4, and then you have your perfect squares. A squared minus 4.
So factor out the 8?
Yeah.
Okay.
You have a minus.
So we're going to factor out an 8. So 8a squared divided by 8 is a squared minus, what's 32 divided by 8? 4. And now we have perfect squares.
So then,
So 4 is a perfect square, and a squared is. So we keep the 8. Okay, so then it looks like this top one, right? So it's a lot simpler here than it is here. We have more work to do. So this was going to be 8 times a,
minus 4.
not minus 4, because remember we have to think about the square root. No, we have to think about the square root of 4. The square root of 4 is 2. Just like the square root of a squared is a.
So it goes a plus 2 and then a minus 2.
A plus 2 times a minus 2.
Okay, so if you don't find any perfect squares, look to see if there's something you can factor out.
Yes.
I thought you couldn't. I think I probably could have done more in the homework then, because I thought that since the A was there but wasn't on the other one, you couldn't factor anything.
Oh, okay.
The 8 has to go with the A, but if it's not that.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, you're just like you're constantly trying to pull out common factors. Like, what do they have in common? Look for those common factors, and then piece it out a little further. So yeah, so this one, and like the part of this one that's the giveaway is that it is a binomial instead of a trinomial. Like it has the square and then it has a constant, the negative 32. Anytime you see that, especially if it's minus, you have 2 terms and it's minus, you're probably going to be able to take the shortcut with it if it's asking you to factor it. Brandon, you look like you're kind of angry at me right now. No? Just processing? Okay. It's a good place to be, right? Not so much. All right, so we're going to work on a worksheet. Let me look at this next problem with us, and because it's the word problem. So the happy, joy, joy. All right, so negative 16t squared plus v sub I times t plus h sub I. So this is the height in feet of a projectile. So what's something that's a projectile?
This.
A bullet, a disc, okay? A flare. Any of those things that were like shooting up in the air. A soccer ball, right? If you kick it straight up, okay? In feet of a projectile after t seconds is expressed by this polynomial. Okay, so negative 16 is a constant. It's never going to change in feet per second squared due to gravitational pull.
Wait, how is it negative?
Because it's dropping.
16 is gravity.
Yeah, so it's pulling things down. So like usually if you're shooting a bullet, it's not at the ground level.
Okay, so
If you're standing on top of a building and you let go of a penny and drop it, it's falling to the ground.
you can't travel a negative distance, though.
It's not traveling a negative distance. It's saying that
the direction of it.
Right.
so the ground is 0, and you're subtracting negatives. Basically, it's not negative. You're subtracting 16 for every second that you have, meaning it's getting 16 closer to the ground every second that passes.
Okay.
You could think of it like an x or y axis. On the y axis, if it's positive, it's going up. If it's negative, it's pointing down.
So it's not necessarily negative. It's saying that
Okay.
it's
What
taking
direction
16.
it's going. Yeah, it's
Good. That's a great way to talk about it. Like the negative is the direction because it's pulling it to the ground. But it is traveling a positive distance. It's just a distance down versus a distance up. Just like there's a distance, we can go left and right. They're absolute values, right? We talk about we can go left, but we still talk about its distance in terms of a positive number. The negative is just the direction of travel. Okay. V sub I. Okay, the I usually means initial. So this is the initial vertical velocity in feet per second. Okay. And so that means like if you're standing and you throw the disc, right? What is its vertical velocity from there? Like when you start off, like how far? Because a lot of times people actually like the projectile tends to go up and then it comes back down, right? Okay. And then h sub I is your initial height in feet. So how tall is the person throwing it? So we take that into consideration. So example 6, the soccer ball is kicked from the ground with the initial vertical velocity of 48 feet per second. Express the height of the ball as a factored polynomial. Okay, so we need to put in here, what would our v sub I be and our h sub I?
The v sub I would be the.
Is that the 48?
What do you guys think? Is that velocity?
I think I don't know.
I mean, it tells you initial vertical velocity of. Yeah, so the v sub I is 48. And how about our height? Soccer ball is kicked from the ground. You do know. 0. Ground is a 0, right? Like in this case, the ground is 0. Plain 0. All right. So now we want to write this as a factored polynomial. So let's put these values into this equation. So we'd have negative 16t squared plus 48t plus 0. Okay. So when we have plus 0, it's kind of hard to factor that. So
would the plus, could you pretend like the plus 0 is there?
yeah, you can absolutely.
Negative 16t squared.
Mm-hmm.
48, and then I think you can factor out the negative 16 squared, t, 16t.
Okay, go ahead and take the negative. Go ahead and take the negative too.
Take the negative.
Yeah, because then you'll have that t squared. Did you want it's negative 16t, right? You said?
Negative 16.
Okay, perfect. So then that will leave us with t.
Minus
minus.
Let me get my calculator.
Okay, he thinks 3. Can anybody confirm that 48 divided by negative, or yeah, divided by negative 16 is negative 3?
3 times 6 is 18. Negative 1 multiplied by 3.
Yeah, -3.
Okay. So you're done. You have expressed the height of the ball as a factored polynomial.
Oh.
You're done. Wasn't so terrible, right?
It's gonna get terrible.
It's gonna
I can feel it.
it's gonna get terrible. You can feel it. It's gonna get terrible. All right. Well, I have a worksheet for you.